Soif Modiste. I'm Nona. In today's lesson, I will show you how to use this doll size sample to construct a double yoke with a box pleat at the back. The double yoke construction allows you to conceal shoulder seams. Do you see how beautifully and cleanly it's finished? You can see it here. It allows you to produce a beautiful and very elegant looking yoke attachment seam on the inside. I will share with you my techniques on how to foolproof your box pleat. By the way, did you know that a box pleat that looks like this is a real box pleat? And a box pleat that looks like this from the good side is called an inverted box pleat. Very often, tailored shirts have box pleats that look like this, like inverted box pleats, but they're placed on the outside. I actually prefer this construction for women's shirts because I feel it gives you a little bit less bulk and a more elegant and tailored look at the back. This little sample only concentrates on the yoke and the box pleat, so I'm leaving the seams on the armhole and the neckline raw and unattached. I hope you enjoy this video. This is the review of the pattern pieces necessary to construct a shirt with a yoke and center back box pleat. This is the front piece of the pattern. We have center front, grain line, and construction notches indicated. We're going to cut 2 of these pieces from fabric. This is the back pattern piece. It will be cut on fold. We only need to cut 1 of these pieces. You will notice that the broken line indicates center back, and the distance between the fold and center back will be used to construct a box pleat at center back. We also have construction notches at yoke attachment line and side seam. This is the yoke of the shirt. We're going to cut 2 of these, even though it is cut on fold. The reason for this is that yokes are used to hide raw edges and all the seam allowances and make the inside of the garment neat and tidy. You will also notice that the broken line at the shoulder does not match the construction notch at the shoulder. The reason for this is that yoke pieces usually have extra depth. The depth is borrowed from the front and added to the back. And because of this, the natural shoulder line ends up on the yoke pattern piece. These are my cut pieces of the shirt sample. I have the front. I cut 2 of these, and I have notched shoulder notches and notches on the side seam. This is the back. The back was cut as 1 piece on fold. I have notched the center of the box pleat with a little triangle like this, and the top at the yoke attachment and the bottom at the hem with the straight cuts. The reason for the difference in the notch shape is to help me distinguish between the center of the pleat and the center of the back of the shirt. When I construct the pleat, this will allow me for more accurate execution of this. I also cut the notch at the yoke attachment line. The notch is also marked here, but I'm not going to cut because I have a fold and it will leave me with a hole if I marked it. And I marked the shoulder at the notches as well. These are the shirt yokes. I've cut 2 pieces and I have notched with just straight cuts at the neckline, center back, on this one as well, neckline, center back, and at the yoke attachment line, center back and center back. And I also marked at the shoulder construction notches and the yoke attachment notch, but of course not in the center because I don't want to end up with a hole in the middle of my fold. I did not mark the broken line, which indicates the natural shoulder. In this small sample, it doesn't really serve any purpose. If I were making a shirt for a person in a regular size, I would use this line to help me fit the person in the shoulder area. With muslin, and it's exactly the same on the front and on the back. I'm going to use just a regular pencil to mark the wrong side, and I think it will make it easier for you also to see which one is the right side, which one is the wrong side. Okay, do you see I've marked it? Now I'm going to construct the box pleat. The box pleat is constructed with the extension of the pleat, so the fullness of the pleat to the wrong side. I am folding my back on the triangle. If you remember from the previous review, I've notched the center of my pleat with a triangle and the fullness or the extension of the pleats. This is my center back with the straight notches. So I'm now folding it right sides together so I can see the crosses. This is the wrong side that's facing me. And I'm folding it at the triangle I hope you can see it right here, the triangle. And I am going to reduce the stitch length on my sewing machine from 2.5, which is regular stitch length, to about 2, maybe even 1.5. I want really tiny stitches. The reason for that is that I am going to vertically secure the fullness of the extension of my pleat at the center back notches. This is going to be done through the straight notches right here. I am going to go down 1/4 inch and vertically just a very tiny 1/4 inch stitch up and down to secure the fullness of the pleat. Okay, needle down. I'm at the notch and just back and forth a few stitches, 1/4 inch. This will be hidden in the yoke attachment seam and nobody will ever know it's there, but it's a huge help in making sure that the pleat does not move when the yoke is attached. Okay, I'm going to trim the long threads. And I will show you what it looks like in a moment. So what I've done is this. Do you see? This is the notch that marks the center back. The triangle right here marks the center of the pleat. This is the wrong side. I can see my little crosses. And now I am going to connect the triangle with the center back, just like this. I'm going to flatten the fullness of the pleat and connect the center of the pleat with the center of the back, like this. Okay, so I have made a box pleat. This is the inside of it. The outside of it is going to look like this. Okay, this is the good side. I will show it in a second. I am going to put a pin where the triangle or the center of the pleat meets the straight notches or the sewn together center of the back of the shirt. And I am going to secure this with what I call stay stitching or permanent basting. Stay stitching and permanent basting refer to stitches that are hidden in the seam allowance. We use them to control pleats and other fashion details. And so what I'm going to do, I'm putting my needle down. I now have regular stitch length, which is 2.5. And I am going to sew across the fullness of my pleat. I'm going to sew from this side through the center to this side. As I come to the pin, I'm going to take it out. I am not back stitching because there's no need. I want to make sure my pleat is fully connected with the edge of the yoke attachment seam. And now I'm going to trim the thread. I'm sewing with contrasting threads so it shows better on the video. Of course, if you're actually making a shirt, you will make sure that your thread matches the color of the fabric. Okay, so this will never be taken out. This will stay here and just hold the pleat in place. So it looks like this. This is the inside or the wrong side of my pleat. This is what a box pleat looks like. This is a regular box pleat. Sometimes on men's shirts, you see a pleat that's called inverted. So the inside of a box pleat is called inverted box pleat. So this is a more traditional shape, but when I make my shirts, particularly for myself or for female clients, I prefer this shape of a pleat. I think it looks more elegant and less bulky on the back. So this is a box pleat. And the inside we have an inverted box pleat. A beautifully made box pleat is pressed into place straight from top to bottom. And if you look at the wrong side of it, or the inverted side, the fullness at the top has to match the fullness at the bottom, and these have to be straight lines. So if you remember when I reviewed the cut pieces, what I did is I had notches for the center back at the top of the sample, and I also made notches at the bottom. Do you see that? I have notches for the center back at the bottom of my sample. So now I'm going to use those notches to line up my pleat. I'm bringing both of those notches to the center, like this, and I am going to turn it to the wrong side because it's easier for me to see that all the lines are straight. And I want you to see that both lines are completely straight up and down. And the fullness or the extension of the pleat, the width of the pleat is the same from top to bottom. I am going to crisply press it in place with steam. And now the inside or the inverted side looks like this. And the outside, the fashion side or the public side looks like this. Since I'm already here, I think I'm going to show you how to attach the first piece of the yoke. So this is the outside or the good side of my shirt. And I am going to take one of the pieces of the yoke that I cut. I'm going to put a cross on one side just with a pencil. This is a sample. It's not going to matter, but I need to let myself know which one is the right side, which one is the wrong side. So my shirt is lying right side up, and my yoke is going to line up with the shirt right side up like this. And then I am going to flip it. So the shirt and the yoke are in this position, and they're good sides together. I know that where the cross is my wrong side of the yoke, and I know where the inverted part of the pleat is the wrong side of my shirt. So I am going to line up the center back notch on the yoke with the center back of the shirt, and I know exactly where that is because I have made a pleat there. And the pin pieces look like this, and now I'm ready to sew. So they're together, pinned together, good sides together. I have pinned my yoke to the shirt, good sides together. And now I'm going to sew from this edge to this edge with regular construction stitch 2.5 from notch to notch. And it really does not matter if the yoke piece is on top or the shirt piece is on top. In this case, it's more comfortable for me to sew with the yoke piece on top. So I'm matching the notches. I'm using regular construction stitch 2.5. Okay, the needle is down, and I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. As I come to the pin, I am going to take it out. Okay, just make sure that all your notches are lined up. All the pattern pieces were made by me. I know that they're going to match. And I'm back stitching at the end of the seam. And I will trim off the threads. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You can see this is the wrong side of my yoke, and this is the wrong side of my shirt. So now when I open it up, do you see the yoke and the shirt together? This is the good side, this is the actual box pleat. The inside is going to look like this. You can see that my little stay stitching or permanent basting is well inside the seam allowance. I don't have to pick it out. Nobody will ever know it's there. Now I am going to press it, and we'll show you at the ironing board how to attach the rest of the shirt so we hide the shoulder seams and the raw edge of the yoke. This is my mostly constructed back for the shirt yoke. I have to press it. So I want to show you again, this is the right side. This is what box pleat looks like on the right side. This is the wrong side. You can see the cross on the yoke right there when I indicated the wrong side, and this is the inverted side of the box pleat. So what I need to do now, I need to press the yoke attachment seam allowance exactly where it's pointing now, towards the yoke. So the way I'm going to do this is the yoke is laying wrong side up. I'm going to take the iron, and I'm holding the yoke so that I do not create an extra pleat on the good side of this. I'm putting the iron on, maybe you can see it better this way. I'm putting an iron this way. I'm holding the yoke and slightly pulling it away from the body of the shirt. And in the meantime, the iron is pressing. And what I get is this, okay? The inside, This is the inside, this is going to be the outside, okay? I just have to tidy up the outside again. I'm going to put my iron this way, and I'm pressing from the body of the shirt towards the yoke. To make a beautiful flat seam, this is a good way to tidy everything up if you have these little bits, okay? So now it looks like this. We have a beautifully pressed back of the yoke. It is now ready to be attached to the rest of the shirt. And remember, the goal of having 2 of these yokes is to hide all the raw edges. So I want to hide this seam allowance, which is now pressed to the inside of the yoke, and the shoulder seams. All of that will be hidden. This is why I don't have to serge it. I don't have to finish the edges of the shoulders or this seam at all. Everything will be hidden inside. I'm going to put this on the side and show you a few more prep pieces that I made for this pattern. This is the second piece of the yoke. You can see that I marked it with a cross. That means this is the wrong side. What I'm going to do with this, I'm going to take the yoke attachment seam, which is this one at the bottom, and I know that the seam allowance, notches tell me so, is 1/2 inch. Do you see their notches here? Pattern told me it's 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to turn it up towards the wrong side, this way, towards the cross, but I will only turn it up 3/8 of an inch. You will see in a moment why. So not at the notch, but a little bit less than the notch. So 3/8 of an inch. I am going to just eyeball the measurement, but you can take a ruler or your tape measure and measure it. Do you see? I have pressed 3/8 of an inch. So you can see that it's not at the notch. My notch is here, and my seam allowance is less than 1/2 an inch, like this. And I'm going to put this on the side, and I will show you the front pieces. The front pieces, the 2 of them, I also marked them with crosses. This is the wrong side of the front pieces. Very important, because the next thing I'm going to show you is the sequence. How do we construct at the shoulders? The shirt front, the second yoke, and the original yoke that's now attached to the back to conceal the shoulder seams and the yoke raw seams, okay? So I am going to start with the back, okay? And the back is going to lay good side up, okay? This is good side up. The next piece that's going to go on it, and I'm going to pin it at shoulder pieces, is the front. And the front is going to be attached at shoulder seams with the center to the center of the back. The wrong side looking up, so they're good sides together. Do you see this is the wrong side of the back? It's laying face down. This is facing up. This is the good side, and the fronts, the 2 pieces of the front are laying good sides together to match the shoulder seams, like this. Okay, I'm gonna take 2 of them at the same time. Also the front to the center front, to the center back. Okay, like this. So remember, these are good sides together. I can see the crosses. That means the wrong side of the front is looking up. Now I am going to take the yoke, and I know I have the wrong side marked. So the yoke is going to lay good side to the wrong side of the front. So the side with the cross of the yoke is going to look up, and I'm going to place it. This is the 3rd layer. So what I have at the shoulder, I have the first yoke, I have one at the fronts, and I have the yoke. And the order of how they go together is like this. The piece that we completed, which is the back with the pleat, with the yoke attached, it's facing good side up. The front is laying good sides together to this piece, so wrong side up, and the yoke is laying wrong side up. So the right side of the yoke is to the wrong side of the front. Now I'm going to pin all of them together, and I will show you that this is indeed the correct way of placing it. You always need to pin it, because this is a little bit counterintuitive. So I like to pin it and then turn it the way it's supposed to end up, just to make sure that I did not make a mistake. Okay, so I'm just putting a pin in the seam allowance at the shoulder, connecting all the shoulder seams at the notches. Okay, so the whole bundle now looks like this. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it. First, I am turning the yoke to the inside. So you can see that this is the part of the yoke that's going to cover the seam allowance that we've sewn, and it has its own seam allowance pressed under. You can see that the shoulder seams are concealed, and now I'm going to flip the front. I'm going to flip the front like this. Do you see? So what I have now pinned together is a little sample of a doll-sized shirt. What I have is I have a front which opens up. This is a good side. This is a good side of the shirt. They're pinned at the shoulders, and when I open up the front, what I should see is I should see concealed shoulder and a turned down seam allowance of the second or internal yoke that will cover all the mechanics of the yoke underneath. Okay, so I know that this is the correct way to place things. Okay, next I'm going to show you how to sew it together. I have here my pinned together pieces, as I showed you in the previous segment. I'm just going to stitch them through all the thicknesses, all the layers. I'm going to line everything up at the notch, from notch to notch, everywhere. So I am sewing through 3 layers. I'm sewing through the external yoke, one of the center fronts, and the internal yoke. Okay, regular stitch length 2.5. I am back stitching at the beginning, and I'm going to back stitch at the end. And before I continue sewing, I just want to realign all my notches. It should be very accurate and very good practice for when you actually construct a regular size shirt. And I just back stitch at the end. I am going to trim the thread and move on to the next shoulder. And so the same thing with the next shoulder. I am sewing through 3 layers, the external yoke, one of the center fronts, and the internal yoke. Back stitch. It is 1/2 inch seam allowance as is shown on the pattern. Just from edge to edge, back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. Okay, so what I have now is 2 sewn seams. And once again, I'm going to segment by segment, turn it to the right side so that you can see that I did a good job in realigning everything in proper sequence. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to turn the internal yoke to the wrong side of the shirt. Do you see? As it flips down, I already have a prepared edge, which is turned towards the wrong side, and this will allow me to conceal all the internal seams, including all the 3 layers of the shoulder seams. If you're making not a small sample, but a regular shirt, and you're working with a fabric which has a sort of a weight like muslin, perhaps a linen or something a little bit medium weight, you may want to, before everything is completed, you may want to go and grade these seams. Maybe the center seam can be taken down a little bit, and one of the seams can be reduced as well, just to grade the seams so you have a little bit less bulk. But regular shirting fabric, something in the lightweight fabric, there's no need to do that, okay? So I am turning down the first seam. I know everything is well. And now the center fronts come back. Both of them come back, and I have, this is the outside of the shirt. You can see that, the little pleat, the box pleat is there. And the center front, I don't see any crosses. That means everything, the wrong sides are to the inside. I open it up, okay? And when I open it up, the internal yoke concealed all the seams. Do you see? All the raw edges are on the inside. So now I will show you how to press it and how to pin the internal yoke seam allowance in place so that it looks beautiful on the outside and on the inside. I am at the iron board with my little shirt, and I'm going to press everything in place. So I am opening it up, and I moved the front pieces out of the way, and I'm just going to work with the back of the shirt and the internal yoke. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to place it right side up. So this is the right side of the back. And I am going to use my iron. I am pulling slightly on the internal yoke just to make sure that it's in place. And I am going to place my iron this way, and I'm going to iron from the front towards the back like this, just to give myself flat seams. So right now it looks like this. This is my back, this is the front, and this is the internal yoke. Everything looks like this. Now that the front is fine, I'm going to go to the back, and I'm going to pull slightly to create a flat seam on the inside of the shirt, like this. Now the front and the back are going to lay flat. I will slightly adjust the good side a little bit. I'm just pulling on the internal yoke just to flatten all the seams. And what I have now is this. I have a shirt. This is the front. I open it up, and you can see that the shoulder seams are beautifully finished. Everything is on the inside of the yoke, and the seams are flat. So the thing I have to do now before I press the front pieces over the back is I have to secure the internal yoke. I am going to sew it in the ditch. So sewing in the ditch means that the seam that I created in the yoke attachment, this is the seam right here. This is called the ditch. I am going to sew it because I don't want to see the seam. There is another way to sew it. You can step slightly up towards the yoke from the ditch, and you can give it a top stitch, maybe 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch away. But I do not want to see the seam, so I am going to stitch in the ditch. So when you stitch something from the good side or the outside, you have to pin it from the good side or the outside. So what I'm doing is, now that I've pressed everything, do you see the inside yoke is lying very nice and flat? I am going to start pinning in the ditch. So I always pin the way I sew. Pinning in the ditch, just a few pins. This is a small sample. So I have 3 here, and I will show you in a moment what this is going to look like. So I've pinned in the ditch. You can see my pins are holding the internal yoke in place. And because I already pressed under the seam allowance for the internal yoke, what I have is a very easy job from the good side, just stitching in the ditch at 3.0 seam allowance to hold the internal yoke in place, and nothing shows on the good side. We're now in a home stretch of this construction sample, and I will show you what I'm going to do. What I have here is I have the seam I created when I sewed the shirt body with the pleat to the yoke, and I pinned it in the ditch because I am going to sew it in the ditch. When you're sewing in the ditch, you have to have the ditch or the right side of the garment facing you. I am going to increase the seam allowance from 2.5 to 3 because this is not a construction seam. This is a tidy up seam. You know, nobody's going to pull on this seam. We don't have to have a shorter stitch to make it stronger. And this length will ensure that the internal yoke, which is pinned right now, is going to be held in place. And I don't want to see top stitching on the outside. If you do not like stitching in the ditch, you have an option of top stitching. So this is the yoke. So from the ditch, you can move 1/8 of an inch up from the seam, from the ditch, and with 3.0, you can give yourself a line of top stitching. It will accomplish exactly the same purpose, but it will be visible, whereas I do not want to see the ditch seam. So I have my machine set at 3.0. Everything is nice and flat underneath. Needle is down. I am going to watch nothing but the needle, because as soon as I take my eyes off the needle, I might be out of the ditch. So I'm going to pull out every pin as I approach it, and my eyes are exactly on the needle, because the needle is going to follow the seam of the ditch. 3.0 stitch length. I am going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. I'm at the next pin. I'm going to take it out. As I take out the pin, I sort of just hold my little shirt with my fingers. If I take my hands off completely, what will happen is that it's possible that the internal yoke will slip from my grasp and something will be inaccurate. So I'm just holding it with my hands to control the sample as I sew. In the ditch, your eyes are on the needle. 3.0 stitch length, and I'm in the home stretch here, and back stitch. And I'm going to cut my threads and show you in a second that the back and the front look very nice. Okay, this is what I have. Remember, I have an off-white muslin and I'm sewing with black thread, but you can barely see anything. I'm going to try and bring it really close. Do you see how the black stitches just sort of show in the ditch, which is the seam? Do you see where I've sewn? If you sew with a matching thread to the color of your fabric, you're not going to see this. Let's see what the inside looks like. This is the inside. This is the yoke, the internal yoke. Do you see? This is my little seam allowance that I've pressed under, and I have a very nice, very beautifully finished line. And you know this is the inside because this is the inverted pleat. These are my little crosses. And so let's take a look at the sample. It looks like this. This is my little small scale shirt that showed you how to sew a double yoke on the shirt, how to conceal all the raw edges. If you are my Seneca student, then yes, for you, what you have to do now is you have to serge the side seams and the hem and the center fronts, and then you will sew your side seams together and you will press them open. You know how to do that without my help. If you're not my Seneca student, I hope you enjoyed this video, and look out for more.